At the end of the 1990 F1 season, it's time to have a quick look at what's been going on in F3 and F3000 and see if we can spot the stars of tomorrow. British Formula 3. As usual, British F3 was something of an international affair thanks to the preponderance of British F1 teams. The 1990 season was dominated by two Finns, both called Mika, Häkkinen for West Surrey Racing and Salo for Allen Docking Racing, both in Ralt RT34 chassis powered by Moog and Honda engines. Out of 17 rounds, one of the Mikas won every one, bar two, one win for Steve Robertson at Silverstone, and one for Christian Fittipaldi, nephew of the great Emerson, at Donington Park. In fact, Fittipaldi got the Grand Slam at that race, round 9, of pole, fastest lap and the win, and that was the only time all year that more than one of those things went to someone other than one of the two Mikas. The two had been fairly evenly matched until round 11 at Snetterton, when Salo spun out in the lead and Häkkinen took the win, to which he then added the next 4 events in a row. Salo got one more win at Thruxton in the penultimate round, but by then it was Häkkinen's title. German Formula 3. Young Michael Schumacher, third in last year's incredibly close series, took a comfortable win after a difficult start, not winning until race 4 at the bizarre and historic Avus circuit in central Berlin, but then winning 5 of the next 6 and coming second in the other one. With his 1989 rivals Karl Wendlinger, Michael Bartels and Heinz-Harald Frentzen all having moved on to International F3000, Schumacher's main rival this year was Otto Rensing, whose spin at a drenched Nürburgring and subsequent disqualification for going against the track direction handed Schumacher the title, while an early challenge by Works Opel driver Wolfgang Kaufmann came to nothing thanks to the unreliability of their new engine. Those three won all but 2 of the 11 rounds between them, the other 2 winners being Peter Zakowski in the penultimate round at the Nürburgring, while British F3 team West Surrey Racing, their own season over, entered their champion Mika Häkkinen at the last race at Hockenheim, which he won. Also in the field, by the way, were 2 women, Ellen Law in her second year and Yolanda Sörer, former Playmate model and wife of Swiss F1 driver Marc Sörer. French Formula 3. As usual in France, the vast majority of the field were French, or at least francophone, and Eric Hellery of the Formula Project team won 4 of the first 6 races, but a strong second half of the season for Graf Racing's Laurent Aiello wasn't enough to deny Ellery the series win, with Aiello actually winding up 5th overall, behind Ludovic Faure, Monegasque driver Olivier Beretta, and Olivier Panis. Italian Formula 3. An evenly matched season in Italy saw Roberto Colciago of Prema Power Team emerge victorious, just 3 points ahead of his chief rival Alessandro Zanardi of RC Motorsport, with other races being won by Giambattista Buzzi, Giuseppe Bugatti, Colciago's teammate at Prema, Mirko Savoldi, Massimo Angelelli and Luca Badoer, as well as that man Mika Häkkinen, entered for a one-off race at Imola, his win there not counting for points. Likewise, Mauro Martini, currently racing in Japan, won a single race again without scoring points. One of the few non-Italians in the field, Gilles Villeneuve's son Jacques, continued to struggle in F3, though with help from the Magione driving school, his 1990 was certainly an improvement on his previous year, and he scored 10 points overall. Japanese Formula 3000. Last year's champion Hitoshi Ogawa was plagued by unreliability in 1990 as Kazuyoshi Hoshino, third last season, recorded 6 wins out of 10 races as he stormed to the title. Last year's runner-up Ross Cheever had an even worse time of it, coming second at the opening race in Suzuka, but then putting up just 2 more single-point finishes to wind up 8th. Third place this year went to Italian driver Mauro Martini, with ex-Real F1 driver Volker Weidler a respectable 5th with a win under his belt. But other F1 refugees Enrico Battaglia, Christian Danner and Johnny Herbert all failed to trouble the scorers much. British Formula 3000. The British domestic F3000 season in just its second year was absolutely dominated by Portuguese rising star Pedro Chaves, driving a Reynard chassis for Madgwick Motorsports, having been personally selected by Nigel Mansell, who was on the team's board. Swiss driver and future touring car star Alain Menu was a rather distant runner-up, while Richard Dean, Ricard Riddell, another future tin top ace, and Marco Greco all won single races each. Madgwick then also entered Pedro Chavez in the last 4 rounds of the International F3000 series, with a 4th place at Brands Hatch the highlight. International F3000. Eddie Jordan Racing, champions last year with Jean Alesi and Martin Donnelly at the wheel, had an all-new lineup this year with both drivers moving up to F1, running 3 cars for Emanuele Naspetti, Eddie Irvine and Heinz-Harald Frentzen, while the French Dams team, who had run Alesi and Jordan hard, had lost Eric Bernard to F1, so Eric Comas was joined by Scott Alan McNish. The season began at a damp Donington Park, where Andrea Montemini of Madgwick took pole, Canadian Stefan Preux of Pacific took fastest lap, but Eric Comas took the race win. But it was overshadowed by the death of a spectator when Alan McNish, Comas's teammate, had a coming together with Naspetti and his car broke up, his rear wheel and engine assembly flying into the crowd. Just a week later, McNish took an emotional Grand Slam at the Silverstone International Trophy, while Graham Hill's son Damon, who hadn't qualified at Donington, had turned heads with a rocket start to overtake both Dams cars, only to suffer a rear tyre blowout. The narrow streets of Pau were next, always a tricky course, and there were 2 restarts due to crashed cars blocking the course. Marco Apicella, last year's runner-up here, and still with first racing, took an early lead but slid off, allowing Belgian Eric van der Poel to take his first F3000 win. Comas dominated the next meeting at Jerez, then won again at Monza as Hill took pole and fastest lap, which he did again at Pergusa but still couldn't translate it to a win, which instead went to Gianni Morbidelli. By now the season was just over halfway through, and with 3 wins from 6, Eric Comas had 33 points to his teammate and closest competitor's 17. With Morbidelli a point behind McNish and the much-fancied Jordan drivers nowhere. Hill was on pole again for the next round in Hockenheim but retired again, with Eddie Irvine mopping up the win to finally put Eddie Jordan back on the top step. Then there were 2 more British rounds, Alan McNish again the victor at Brands Hatch, with Hill following him home to finally get on the scoresheet, never mind the podium, and Van der Poel at the Birmingham Super Prix, while Comas retired from both British rounds. So with the 3 French races left, Comas still led but only by 10 points from McNish, with Irvine and Van der Poel closing in too. First up was the Bugatti circuit at Le Mans, where Comas got back to winning ways, with Montemini second and Van der Poel third. That settled things as far as the championship was concerned, with McNish unable now to catch his teammate. With the uncertain international situation over in the Middle East in October 1990 and discussions of banning tobacco advertising in France, the decision was made to cancel the planned last race at Dijon, so the final round would be at Nogaro, with McNish, Van der Poel and Irvine all in the running for second place. Comas came second here, but it was Eric Van der Poel who came through for his 3rd win of the year to take second overall, with poleman Morbidelli third. And so in the end, Eric Comas won the title by a comfortable 21 points, having never lost the lead all year, while Jordan had a pretty dismal season as they geared up for an assault on F1. Irvine came 3rd overall with a single win, but Frentzen and Naspetti barely featured. Macau Grand Prix. And so to the climax of the lower division season, the Macau Grand Prix in late November, with the usual assortment of F3 and F3000 personnel, some driving for their regular season teams, some for others, and some for scratch outfits put together just for Macau. Most of the drivers who'd impressed in their domestic series were there. Eddie Irvine entered by West Surrey Racing in a joint entry with Teddy Yip's Theodore team, alongside their own man Mika Hakkinen. Michael Schumacher there for his own WTS Racing. Prema entering there 2 Italians, Colciago and Bugatti, and Alan Docking entering Mika Salo and Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Pedro Chavez was there too, as was the Racing for Europe team based in France, with Belgian Philippe Adams, Frenchman Laurent Aiello and Monegasque Olivier Beretta. As usual, the race was run in 2 heats. Mika Hakkinen took pole for the first race, a second ahead of Schumacher, who was expected to be his main rival. The German bogged down at the start, though, allowing the 2 Marlboro cars of Hakkinen and Irvine into the lead. Schumacher made his way back up to 3rd, then past Irvine for 2nd. Salo and the yellow Alan Docking car came past Irvine soon afterwards. An inter-Japanese struggle between Hisashi Wada in the blue Capcom racing car and Keiki Tsuchiya in the camera-equipped Endless Project one ended in a smash that brought out the course cars and ended any chance of Schumacher catching Hakkinen, who took a lights-to-flag win over the 15 laps, 3 seconds ahead of Schumacher, with Salo 3rd, Irvine 4th and Laurent Aiello 5th. The two Japanese drivers who'd crashed, clearly no worse for wear, had a quick chat for the TV cameras, joined by Naoki Hattori, and then it was time for the second heat with Häkkinen and Schumacher again on the front row. This time Schumacher got his start right, but Häkkinen got his even righter, and the pair of them haired off into the lead, with Salo leading the chasing pack. The British and German F3 champions were giving some great racing. No time in a 15-lap race to play the waiting game, until Schumacher came through as Salo closed up, pursued closely in turn by Aiello, Frentzen and Irvine. Häkkinen wasn't letting Schumacher go though, and would still win the event on aggregate if he finished less than 3 seconds behind him, as the pair once again left the chasing pack behind. As Häkkinen moved out to overtake on the straight at the beginning of the last lap, Schumacher moved right to block him. The Finn clipped the rear of the German's Reynard before slowing sideways into the barriers and bouncing across the track. Schumacher, his rear wing in shreds, continued as a furious Häkkinen climbed out. With only a short distance left and a huge lead, Schumacher took the win, with Aiello and Salo following him home, Irvine 4th and Riddell 5th. Michael Schumacher thus took the overall trophy, with Mika Salo 2nd and Eddie Irvine 3rd, while Mika Häkkinen was unclassified, having not finished all 30 laps, but was gracious enough to give a little wave as he sat there contemplating what might have been. Links in the description for the Macau Grand Prix footage, commentary in Japanese, and the season roundup of German F3, commentary in German, and be sure to join me next time as we look at the runners and riders for 1991.